As you can see, our team composition was already at a huge disadvantage from the start. We had two marksmen. Our hyper was Popple and Koopa, while I was playing Clint in the gold lane. If that wasn't already risky enough, we had no frontline at all. There was literally no one who could protect us or even check the bushes safely. Every single hero on our team was squishy, which made it extremely difficult to take fights or contest objectives. On the other hand, the enemy draft was perfectly balanced and well-structured. They had strong crowd control and stuns from Tigreal, Gord, and Bane. To make things worse, burst and sustain damage from Beatrix and Bane, and even a high-mobility assassin like Lancelot, who could easily dive into the backline and take us out. We were playing Duo Q, but honestly, it didn't even feel like the enemy team was a random stack. They played with perfect coordination. Their rotations were clean, their ganks were well-timed, and they applied constant pressure on us from the early game itself. Because of that, we started to lose control of the early game really badly. Our map was shrinking, and every time we tried to push or farm safely, someone from the enemy side would appear out of nowhere. It was one of those matches where you realize that no matter how well you position or try to play smart, the draft gap and coordination difference just make everything so much harder. As you can see, the enemies were constantly applying pressure not only in my lane, but also in our jungle. Their rotations were perfectly timed. While one or two were zoning me out in lane, the others were invading and choking our jungler's farm. This balanced and well-coordinated pressure made it extremely difficult for me to manage fights or even find a safe position to deal damage. This match was truly one of those games where you lose hope both in the early and late game. From the very beginning, the enemies were completely dominating us, constantly rotating, ganking from every side of the map, and giving us no room to breathe. Their map control and pressure were just on another level. And the reason I said there was no hope even in the late game is because of their hero draft. The enemy team literally had everything you could ask for: strong crowd control, burst damage, sustain, mobility, and great team coordination. They had Tigreal, one of the best CC initiators in the entire game. His ultimate alone was a huge threat. If I stayed close to my teammates, it would only make things worse because he could catch all of us in one perfect setup. That's why I had to constantly maintain a tricky position, far enough to avoid Tigreal's ultimate, but close enough to still deal consistent damage. You can really learn from this match how important positioning and awareness are, especially when your team lacks a solid frontline. Of course, I also made several mistakes throughout the game. There were moments when I mispositioned or took unnecessary risks, which led to a few deaths that could have been avoided. But that's exactly why I chose this gameplay. Not to show a perfect match, but to demonstrate both the good and the bad. I want to break it down for you, explain my positioning, my decisions, and the mistakes I made, so you can understand how to adapt in difficult situations like this one. For those who don't know, when you're dealing with Lancelot, the key is to stay close to him. It might sound risky, but it actually helps reduce the amount of damage you take, especially from his second skill, Thorned Rose. That ability deals maximum damage when you're at the center or slightly away from him, so by staying near, you can avoid taking the full burst. Of course, I can't guarantee that this trick will help you survive every time, because some Lancelot players are just too skilled. They can still find ways to burst you down even in close range. But in most situations, this tip will help you minimize his damage output and give you a better chance to escape or fight back. And if you're playing Clint, or really any marksman who has a dash skill or any mobility ability, you need to be very careful about when you use it. The same goes for battle spells like Flicker. Flicker is fine since most players save it for emergencies, but the real issue is that many players underestimate how important their dash skill is. They use it too early, either to poke or reposition slightly, and then end up without an escape option when the enemy suddenly dives in. I've made that same mistake several times in this match. There were moments when I used my dash too early just to chase or adjust my position, and when Lancelot or Tigreal came in, I had nothing left to escape with. That's one of the biggest reasons why I died a couple of times here. I already mentioned that I made quite a few mistakes in this gameplay. And that's exactly why I chose to show you this match, so that you can learn from what I did wrong. Think of it like this. I made the mistakes, so you don't have to. Now here, take a look at my positioning and, more importantly, my awareness, especially regarding Tigreal. Throughout the fight, I was constantly mindful of his ultimate. I knew that at any moment, he could appear using Conceal and try to set up a massive engage. That's why I always kept a safe distance and maintained awareness of his possible position. And that's exactly what happened here. Tigreal used Conceal to surprise us. But because I was already expecting it, I didn't move forward to continue attacking Bane. I held my position and played it safe, which ended up saving me from being caught in Tigreal's ultimate. This is a really good example of how awareness can make a huge difference in your gameplay. Always try to predict your enemy's movements and remind yourself which heroes are missing from the map, especially those who can change the entire fight with one skill. Sometimes, just being aware that someone dangerous might be nearby is what keeps you alive and lets you turn a bad situation into a good one. From this point onward, I started playing a bit recklessly, which was completely my fault, and I was dead. But honestly, that mistake turned into a good learning example to explain you. With heroes like Clint, going to the front line alone, even just to push a lane, is extremely risky. You should only push when you're sure all enemies are visible on the map, and preferably, they should be on the opposite side of where you are. If any of you have watched the YouTuber Enemy Killer, who is known as a global Clint player, you'll see exactly what I mean. From observing his gameplay, I've noticed that he always stays safe and calculated. When his team is losing, he doesn't rush out. He often stays near the base, waits for the right moment, and deals damage from a safe distance. He always positions himself away from his teammates, but still close enough to support and deal consistent damage when needed. Sometimes he'll even stay on the opposite side of the map to split push and create pressure, forcing the enemy team to respond. This smart positioning and patience are what allow him to turn around even the hardest matches. So, for my mistake here, the lesson is simple. When you're playing a squishy, low-mobility marksman, your positioning is everything. Be patient, stay aware of the map, and never push alone unless you're absolutely sure it's safe. Here, I'm checking all the bushes, because I know that in our team, there's no real front line. No one who can safely face-check the area. So, I took on that responsibility myself, mainly to keep our hyper-aware of any potential Lord steal attempts by the enemy team. Checking bushes before taking Lord is something many players underestimate. I've seen it happen a lot. People skip 1 or 2 bushes, assuming they're empty, and that one small mistake ends up costing the entire Lord fight. Even in my own squad, players sometimes forget to check, and it leads to enemies suddenly appearing from an unexpected bush, using retribution or burst skills to steal the Lord right in front of us. So always remember, before starting Lord, make sure every nearby bush is checked and cleared. It might seem like a small thing, but it can be the difference between securing the objective safely or losing everything to a surprise steal. Here, our Hyper and Fighter really pulled off an amazing play. One of them distracted the enemies, while the other went straight for the base finish. Without that last, clutch play, this match would have been a complete loss. Honestly, I had zero hope left at that point, but thanks to those two, we actually managed to win the game. Yes, guys, I'll admit it, I got carried by randoms this time. But even then, performing the way I did as a marksman whose lane was constantly ganked again and again, with the worst team composition against one of the strongest enemy drafts filled with meta heroes and perfect coordination, is no small thing. Maintaining focus and composure as a squishy hero without a single front line is incredibly tough. I had to keep my positioning, awareness, and spacing in mind every single second of the game. If we had just one proper tank or initiator, things could have been totally different. I might have been able to play more aggressively, secure more kills, and turn the fights faster. But in that match, I had no freedom to play that way. Instead, I had to constantly think ahead, predicting enemy movements and making sure they couldn't suddenly dive or wipe us out. That kind of gameplay takes patience and awareness more than anything else. But the biggest lesson from that match is simple: never lose hope. When I first saw both drafts, I was completely convinced that we'd be dominated from early to late game. And yes, the early game looked hopeless. But what made the difference was that no one in our team gave up. There was no trash talk, no blame, just focus and effort. Because of that, we were able to stay calm, think clearly, and turn the game around, even with such a tough lineup. So remember, even if everything seems lost, as long as your team keeps its composure and teamwork, you can still pull off miracles like this. So now, this is another match, also a completely different match than before, and as you can see, once again, the enemies are constantly targeting me in the early game, especially Franco, who just wouldn't leave me alone. But the big difference between this match and the previous one is the support and frontline. Even though the enemies were always trying to gank and catch me, but this time I had solid protection from both my tank and hyper. Because of their support, I was able to get a lot more free space on the map, enough to move, farm, and fight comfortably without worrying too much about sudden dives or ganks. It's not like my teammates didn't help me in the previous match. They did come to my lane a couple of times. But the problem back then wasn't effort, it was hero capability. Our lineup simply couldn't handle the enemy's pressure, no matter how well we tried to coordinate. The enemies had stronger picks, better synergy, and more control, so even when help arrived, we still got dominated. But in this match, our tank is Tigreal, and that made all the difference. His crowd control and initiation created the space I needed to perform as a marksman. With him leading the front line, I finally had the freedom to position properly, play aggressively when needed, and contribute fully in team fights. Just like I mentioned earlier, even having one proper front line can completely change the flow of the game. It gives your damage dealers the confidence and room they need to shine, and that's exactly what happened here. Guys, I think I probably should have built Sky Piercer in this match, because even though I was contributing a lot in fights, I wasn't actually securing many kills. The damage output was there, but the finishing power just wasn't enough, so Sky Piercer could have really helped me convert those assists into kills. But still, you can clearly see the difference between this match and the previous one. This just shows how much drafting can affect the entire outcome of a game. The difference in team composition changes everything, from how freely you can play to how well your team can fight together. That's why I always say that drafting is almost 50% of the battle. If your team manages to win the draft phase, you've already secured around half of the victory right there. The only exceptions are when the enemy team outplays you heavily in mechanics, or when they pull off something sneaky like a backdoor base push. So, never underestimate how important hero draft and team balance are. It's often the deciding factor between an easy win and an impossible fight. So that's all for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the gameplay and maybe learned something new from it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you won't miss the next one. See you all in the next video.
Victory!